It's a trap to get focused so much on gaining the knowledge at the cost of acting it out. I was on my way out of the bookstore with a book in hand called The Blade Itself, which is a fantasy book. And a woman who worked there, and I got there as soon as it opened. I was very, very on the ball with this. She came over and she asked if she could help. I said, no, I already got a book I'm interested in. And she said, oh, like you're into fantasy. Well, let me show you some options if you're looking at reading more of this. And so we spent about 5 to 10 minutes going through the fantasy section, going through all the main authors and series. And and I got interested back in fantasy. But where did this even start? So for probably the better part of 5 years, my reading has been focused solely on nonfiction. It's been history, as you all probably are aware, a lot of Stoicism, a lot of philosophy, a little bit of fiction, Catch-22, 1984 by George Orwell, but predominantly it's been nonfiction from a philosophical standpoint. And I found myself craving something a little different. And I used to read a bit of fantasy, and so I picked up this book, which was a ChatGPT recommendation. And it got me thinking about how really there's two types of reading, so to speak. There's reading to learn, which if you're a student, you will do that. If you're a philosopher, you will do that. And then there's reading just for enjoyment. And so I've been trying to get back into reading just for enjoyment. Reading obviously has a lot of benefits aside from learning. Simply being able to sit down and read something, attention span. We all have issues with attention span now. To be able to sit down and read a book for 30 minutes without looking at your phone, that's a challenge these days for a lot of people. All that to say, if you want to read more, and maybe you're getting a little bored of the philosophy or the nonfiction or the learning part of it, try some fiction. Try doing something just for the sake of enjoying it, as opposed to necessarily having an intention to learn it. And as a follow-up from my last episode where I talked a lot about intentions and why you're doing things, this is a great example of that, where you can have intentions around the same act, but they can be completely different intentions depending on what you want out of it. So if you set aside 30 minutes a day to read nonfiction or to read philosophy, for example, that's intentional. You could also set aside time just to read and enjoy it, and that's also intentional. And there's nothing wrong with either of those. In fact, I would argue that both of those have a place in your day. Both books have a role to play in your library. But let me go back even a little bit further. I wanted to touch on that just briefly, that it's okay just to have a hobby, just to enjoy doing things, and that's completely fine, and it's completely Stoic. But I wanted to go back to really why I found myself reading less and wanting to read more, and then ultimately picking up some fiction. I love being in bookstores because I'm a nerd. I probably love being in bookstores more than I actually enjoy reading, funnily enough. And so I used to go into bookstores a lot, frequently. I still do, maybe once every week or once every couple of weeks. And I'll just browse. I'll go to the philosophy section. I love seeing the new versions of Meditations and Epictetus's works. And I love looking at the new books on Stoicism, which I never end up reading because, to be frank, there's not a whole lot more I can gather from some of these books. And I love just browsing, going into the business section, the leadership section, just being present in a bookstore. It's quiet. People there, you can tell, are there to engage in this habit, which is beneficial in many, many ways. But I found that I would go to these bookstores and I would look around and I would flick through the books and I would enjoy being there. But I wouldn't actually buy anything. I wouldn't buy any books. And I noticed this trend. And I thought, well, why is this the case? And it really speaks to something that I did an episode on this, I don't know, maybe 20 episodes ago, on just the gap between what we know and what we can practically implement in our day. Meaning, let's say there is the Stoic lifestyle that you are aiming to achieve. You want to be a Stoic sage. If you are brand new to Stoicism, you're going to have to spend a lot of time reading just to understand the principles. You're going to have to spend time memorizing what the dichotomy of control is, what's in your control, what's not in your control, and so on. And so if you look at, your process of being a Stoic sage, there's going to be a lot of it that you can't even really be simply because you don't know the material enough. Now, maybe you are acting stoically and you're just not aware of it. That's possible too. But if we're treating Stoicism as really a what would you call it? An endeavor, a journey, a process, you're going to have to learn the Stoic principles and even things like Stoic history, because that's important as well to understand a lot of these ideas. So there's this of knowledge that you have to actually acquire for you to actually be a Stoic to begin with. So if you're a beginner Stoic, you might know like 5% of Stoicism, say. If you're a Stoic expert, you might know 95%, maybe not quite 100%, but I don't know if anyone actually gets there. And then there's that phase where you learn principles and you're on that journey of learning Stoicism or anything. This applies to anything in life, really, but you're in the process of learning and you have to act. You have to implement these learnings. So, dichotomy of control. What's up to me, what's not up to me. Once you memorize that and you know that principle, that's awesome. Good for you. Congratulations. But then you have to actually put that into practice. You have to, throughout your day, be able to implement that. And anytime you find yourself being bothered or challenged by something, you have to remind yourself of the dichotomy of control, fix it, move on, get over it. Hey there. Let me thank you for being a listener to this ad-free podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, there are a few things you can do to help me out. A 5-star review on Spotify or wherever you're listening to this really does help, and it's free. You can also sign up for my Substack newsletter or Patreon. Substack free gets each episode emailed to you along with the transcripts in the form of an article. You'll also get access to my live talks, followed by a Q&A afterward. Substack Premium supporters and my patrons on Patreon get access to the recordings and a brief article of those Q&A sessions, access to full episodes of the Paradoxically Speaking podcast, my Steps to Success interview series, Stoic meditations, and much more. Links to Substack and Patreon can be found in the show notes. Now, I say dichotomy of control because it's like Stoicism 101. I would say I'm still not like 100% there myself in terms of implementing that lesson, that Stoic philosophy. And that's just one of many. Yeah, I'm there in some regards. I have it actioned in my life in many ways, but there's a certain percentage on how much throughout my day, throughout my week and year that I'm actively acting and living aligned with the dichotomy of control in this case. All that to say, there's the being a Stoic, say 100 points to be a Stoic. Let's say you got 50 points on understanding what Stoicism actually is. And let's say you're 50% there on actioning that. I mean, that makes you like a 25% Stoic. Not to say that, you want to get this down to a mathematical number or a mathematical equation. The point I'm trying to make is that there's a gap between what you know of Stoicism and what you can actually act out. And the more you know about Stoicism, the more you have to focus on actually implementing this in your daily life to a large degree. And very few people are fully aligned with who they want to be. Probably nobody is fully aligned with who they want to be, because these things are really hard. These things, like, it's really hard to keep dichotomy of control in your mind at all times, to live with that, to have all of your intentions aligned with that. Going back to this book. So, the reason why I would go into stores and I would look and I would browse and I would enjoy flicking through the new meditations books, but I wouldn't actually buy anything, is because I felt, and perhaps there's a bit of ego in here as well, I felt like there was nothing I could really gain from the books I was looking at. Yes, if I read meditations again and again and again and again, I would pick up like little nuggets of information. I would notice things I hadn't noticed before, and I do regularly read the Stoic texts, maybe once a year or once every 2 years. I'll reread them. But the vast majority of growth for me in these areas comes down to the gap in action, not necessarily the gap in knowledge. And it's a trap to get focused so much on gaining the knowledge at the cost of acting it out. And you see this with people who, they always have to buy the newest Stoic book. They always have to buy the new business book, the new leadership book, the new philosophy book. It's not necessarily a bad thing to freshen up and to reread these things and to stay on top of the latest research. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. What I'm saying is it can be a bad thing if learning about these things or rereading these things is costing you implementation. And it will, because you only have so much time in the day. So you have to spend at least some of your time focused on the implementation of these lessons. And so here's what I would encourage you to do. Whatever area you're interested in, Stoicism, probably something that you're working on. Maybe you're a barber and you're really focused on becoming the best possible barber. There's going to be things you have to learn, not necessarily just through reading, but even just through practice. Like you have to, watch somebody on YouTube do this fade, and then you have to learn how to do it with your clippers, and then there's the skill and there's the practicing of that action implementation that we're talking about. So there's the knowledge required to do it firsthand, meaning how to, do a fade, but you might not have the exact dexterity, or you might not have the full confidence to do it properly. And so that's the action implementation part of it. Whatever you're interested in, yes, it's fine if you continue to read and to learn and to gather more information and intel and instruction, and that should be some part of it. But you should, at a certain point, you should put a lot more focus into, how do I master this craft that is X, that is Y? How do I master this craft that is Stoicism? How do I master this craft that is being a barber, being, an engineer, being a manager, being a laborer, being a gardener, whatever it is that you're interested in? How do I master this craft? And I suspect that the reason why a lot of us find ourselves in this loop of watching a barber do something that you already know how to do, but you're still struggling with it because of the action part, is because mastering a craft is tedious. It's tedious. It takes like 10,000 reps to master anything. So you put that into perspective. 10,000 times you have to be confronted with a dichotomy of control issue in your life that's causing you stress, and then you have to work through the dichotomy of control, and then you have to manage it, figure it out, move on. Let's put that into perspective. If once a day, you're confronted with something regarding the dichotomy of control, and you work your way through it mentally, you write it down in a notebook, you say, this is what happened, this is in my control, therefore I'm going to do this, or this is not up to me, therefore I'm going to put it in its right place, and you do that once a day. And you can ask yourself if you're actually doing that once a day. Let's say you're doing it once a day, this little practice. That's 365 reps a year. So in 3 years, that's 1,000 reps. A little bit more, but 1,000 reps. So 10,000 reps, that's 30 years. I hope I did my math right. Just bear with me here because I don't want to be like an idiot. I am an engineer. Yeah, 30 years. That's 27 years. So let's say 30 years. So if you practice the dichotomy of control once a day, and which again, maybe you are, maybe you're not. I would challenge a lot of people, including myself, if I'm actually even doing that. That's 30 years for you to get 10,000 reps in doing that. All that to say, where the gold is in the implementation. Yes, you have to learn. Yes, you have to study. Yes, you have to read. But being able to implement these things, that is what takes a lot of time. 10,000 reps once a day is 30 years. And so you better get started right now. You better get started at getting as many quality reps in as you can, because 30 years is a long time. And no, it's not that long when you think about it in the span of your life, because we have very short lives, but 30 years is a very long time for you to master something. So if you just learned about the dichotomy of control today, and every day you practice it, in 30 years, you might have this mastered. Now, that might sound depressing to some of you. How am I going to master this craft? How am I going to get the motivation to do this? But in some sense, it's also a relief. It's a relief that if you learned about Stoicism 2 years ago and you're still struggling with dichotomy of control, guess what, man? You probably only have like 700 reps in. It's okay. It's okay. You're going to be all right. Just keep on the path. So maybe lower your expectations a little bit. Don't expect you to learn about something and then have it positively implemented the very next day. That's not how these things work. So be a bit forgiving on yourself. So let's recap. Know the difference between doing something with intention A versus intention B versus intention C. You can read to enjoy it. You can read to learn. You can read to, distract yourself from something, which might be good or bad. But you can have different intentions with the same thing, and just be clear on what those intentions actually are. And finally, try and get a feel for how far you are along in whatever you might be interested in terms of the knowledge acquirement versus actually implementing this in your daily life. And the quicker you can learn something, the quicker you can practice it, and the quicker you can practice it, the quicker you can master it. And don't forget, never forget, don't forget this, dear friend. Get your rep in today. Get your one little drop in the bucket, your dichotomy of control drop in the bucket, because it's going to take 30 damn years for that bucket to fill up.